Rich people who married someone significantly poorer. What surprised you about their previous way of life? Making financial decisions based around the 3-paycheck month. If you're paid every 2 weeks, most months you get 2 paychecks, and all of your monthly bills and budgeting is based on those 2 paychecks. But twice a year, there are 3 paydays in a month, and that's when you can actually solve problems. That's when you can get the car registered, or fix the dryer, or get the cat sprayed. The other 10 months you're doing maintenance and trying to scrape by. 3 paycheck months you can actually try to fix problems. More of a funny incident, but I was the poor one. My husband, at the time still boyfriend, took me out to a very nice restaurant. Waiter asks if I want pepper on my Caesar salad that was just made tableside. I said sure, and he goes about it. Thing is, I didn't know you had to say stop. My husband slowly realizes this but decides to see it play out. He did eventually say that I need to stop. I just thought a Caesar salad was had this way as it was my first time even eating a salad that wasn't just iceberg and ranch dressing. It still tasted fine, just a little bit too much pepper. Oh, that's really cute. But I'm actually about to sneeze just thinking of the amount of pepper that was on that salad. So did you finish the salad? Because I feel like that would have been quite... Pepper's not acidic, is it? But it's just hot and smoky. I feel like it would have been too much of a hot sensation to finish. I was adopted at age 7. I lived in extreme poverty. And then all of a sudden, I lived with a doctor who bought gifts for birthdays and Christmas. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know you could go to the store to get food. I just thought you went to church and had to pray before they give you a bag of food. When the family had people over for dinner, if they ended the prayer before the meal with FHB Amen, it was a signal to let the children know that they don't have enough food for everyone. So take smaller servings and let the guests get a regular serving. FHB equals family, hold back. They were always so generous to their friends and didn't let their lack of funds embarrass themselves when doing so. Rich people who want to marry someone significantly poorer. Hello. Edit. Figures my most upvoted comment is me being a gold digger, but I'll take it as a win since I got gold. Honestly, food insecurity. When we were first married, she would get visibly uneasy if the food in the house was running low. She would never overreact or anything, she was just always concerned about it. A lot of times when she was younger, she went hungry. On the humorous side though, she hates camping. Her answer is always the same. I camped because it was fun. She camped because they couldn't afford hotels. She and her mother lived with her grandfather to not be homeless because her grandfather owned a house. She was putting community college payments on her credit card and building debt with it. I paid off her credit cards when we were dating, and she cried for me being so nice. It was only like $1,300. I bought a condo, then we got married, then we bought a house. I never really considered myself rich until I started dating her and learned that a trip to Wendy's was a treat. I grew up middle class, and we are currently middle class. Ah, what a dream, hey? How the other half live. Any rich viewers on here want to take me on a date? I can promise you a good time. Oink, oink. My wife was born and raised in the Soviet Union. She still goes crazy for fresh fruit like it's the most extravagant luxury. Fresh fruit is an extravagant luxury. It's the best thing since sliced bread. The prevailing mindset in his community growing up that insurance was something only rich people had. Not health insurance, mind you. Well, not just health insurance. Auto insurance. Going without it was a way of life for most Sandwiches. When I made him a sandwich, I only put one thin slice of meat in it. He couldn't believe that was how I had sandwiches growing up. I didn't marry this woman, but when we started dating, she always wanted to chill at my place, never hers. Which was fine, but she gained 33 pounds in just a few months of dating. She was 100 pounds when we started dating. Not that it was a bad thing. 1, I'm a chubby man, and 2, I was just glad she wasn't pregnant. Anyway, turns out her family couldn't afford dinner sometimes, so suddenly she had a place to eat every night and gorged herself. I fell in love with my uni best friend who really didn't have any money. When I got a job, for my birthday I decided to plan a holiday and offered to bring him along. He doesn't know I'm in love with him at all, but maybe I should tell him. My partner and I are both poor, but different kinds of poor. She's never been homeless or not had enough to eat, while I have. She's extremely frugal and hates buying anything we don't need. I feel a desperate need to stock up if we have any extra money, and it's a fight for me to not fill our house with canned and dry goods in case we don't have enough money to buy food next month for some reason. It makes no sense, but my instinct is to hoard food because there was just never enough of it around growing up. Wow, it's actually mad, isn't it? You just never think of other people's upbringings or stuff they've been through, which is why you should always be nice to people, gang. But yeah, my heart goes out to you guys. Like, that's just a basic human need, isn't it? And you were lacking it. And I'm sorry. I'm not rich at all, but my husband came from a very poor Mexican village. He told me he used to shower outside because there was no in-house plumbing and use leaves as toilet paper. I mean, there's poor and there's my husband's previous life poor. He's been living in the US for 12 years now, but when we first met, it was so interesting seeing life through his childlike eyes. Going to the cinema was a huge event for him. Heating food up in a microwave was a totally foreign concept. And staying at fancy hotels when we went on vacation was like, whoa. I still see him surprised by things now and then, and it just reminds me how much I take my middle status class for granted. Hamburger Helper. She hates it because it would be her meal 5 times a week growing up. I'd never even seen Hamburger Helper before I went to college and loved that stuff. 10 for $10 deals are awesome. This has just reminded me actually, guys, if anyone watching lives in the UK, download an app called Too Good To Go. It's where you can get like really, really cheap food. It's just basically leftovers. And it supports small businesses as well, to be fair, which is great. But yeah, you can get like a Greggs Lucky Dip bag for like £1, and you can get like 8 sausage rolls, donuts, baguettes, the lot. So yeah, thought that could be helpful to someone. My significant other said, today I made rent. Meaning, today I've earned enough/accumulated enough to pay the rent. And I realised that this is a monthly accomplishment to someone with no fixed income/salary. One of my exes could pull in a lot of money, easily twice or thrice what I could. He was so incredibly bad at saving this money, down to, say, setting himself up as a company to avoid paying higher rate of tax, but then paying a large amount each month to an accounting company to handle his taxes, which he'd do himself anyway because he didn't trust them to get it right. He'd pay for taxis from one end of the city to another, or hire cars rather than use public transport. Flights cancelled? Book new ones. Never bother to claim back on insurance. Buy a sports car, wreck it, sell it for scrap. He'd work contracts and then take time off work on his own startup, but spend every weekend just going out and buying drugs and booze. I thought it was really fun and wild at first. Money really means nothing to you, but when we become a long-term couple, I started feeling like his mother. Man, will you not just fill out the insurance paperwork? My husband grew up in a family where they were comfortable, but on a strict budget. 6 kids and mum on disability. My family had no budget. One day, we were at the grocery store, and he always insists on walking up and down every aisle. I finally lost it because he was taking so long and asked him why he did it. Growing up, we could only spend $100 a week on groceries for all of us. I always had to put what I wanted back because we couldn't afford it. Now I can afford whatever I want, so I like to look at everything I could have. Took him 10 years to tell me this. I felt like a terrible person. Edit. Thanks for the silver, kind homies. Edit. I've had a few people, very few, comment that $100 a week is a huge budget, and how is that a stretch? We live in a city with an extremely high cost of living. It's in the top 30 in the world. Getting a family of 4 fed for that much weekly would be a huge stretch here, and his family did an amazing job. Not rich, but with a partner who was raised by a teen mum and grew up poor. Sometimes I just want rice and vegetables for dinner. That's a no from her. She won't go back. My dad was the opposite. Grew up quite poor and built a business up and ended up doing quite well. Still eats like there's only 25 cents in his checking account. Left alone, he would gladly eat ramen every day, and his go-to meal is rice porridge. We went to Moderna a few years ago, literally named the best restaurant in the world. We all went for the tasting menu, but he asked to order a la carte. And he wanted to order just buttered fettuccine. He only agreed to the tasting menu when they insisted that the whole table had to do it, if some of us were doing it. He'll even insist on eating things that have been burned or drink milk that's just starting to turn. I was with a girl for a while who grew up in a pretty broken home. Still surprises me just how bad her spending habits are. She racks up credit card debt like it's nothing. And she ain't the only one, let me tell you that for nothing. No, I'm joking, but I am racking up a slight debt, however. But it's fine. That's a story for another day. She lived in the desert without air conditioning. Long-term dating. Pets. I was always surprised by the number of pets she and her family had living in the trailer and how much of a share of their income they spent on them. Well, pets give you unconditional love, and that's important when you don't have much else. Better than drugs. A more constructive use of money. Yeah, 100%. I bet those animals brought them such joy in really hard times. Credit cards were avoided. For me, growing up, we were encouraged to get a credit card in our name and use it as much as possible in order to build credit. There was always money to pay it off each month, so it made sense to 1, build credit, and 2, collect airline miles or whatever the reward was back in the day. When we got together, she always used cash or a debit card. She had a credit card for emergencies and avoided using it otherwise. It took a long time to get her over her aversion/skepticism. We were fortunate to have 2 good-paying jobs. Though it also taught me a healthy appreciation for what it means to have a financial cushion. The logic of buying things on credit card that you could buy with cash in order to build a credit score is pretty weird when you think about it. You're basically taking out a loan that you don't need to show you're responsible with money. I dated a 1%er briefly. She was surprised I willingly went inside fast food restaurants. Edit. Since people are saying 1% is still a huge range in income, I just looked up her dad. He pulls in $10,000. I'm not dating her, but she's a good friend of mine, and her parents are definitely 1%ers. I told her I had to work this summer to save up for a graduation trip, and that money was going to be tight for the next year. But I'd love to go on a safari after graduation if I managed to save enough. Mind you, I'm solidly upper middle class. Her parents paid for it just because I'd helped her move into her apartment. It's not like that's what friends are for or anything. Not super rich by any means, but my husband said he'll always be surprised about the following. How I lived off of $13,000 in 2011. Resiliency to survive financially and pursue my dreams of being the first college graduate. How I didn't know what spinach was or tasted like until our first few dates, in addition to hella other leafy greens. First real date in my 20s. We went to a steakhouse. When the waiter asked me how I wanted my steak, I said cooked. Lol, yikes. Didn't know there was any other way than how my dad cooked steaks. Cheap flat steaks topped with ketchup or ranch dressing. My experience is from the opposite perspective. I was the poor one. It absolutely floored me how my wife acts when something broke, like a car, appliances, clothes, etc. As a child, living below the poverty line, replacing a tyre or other necessities was a disaster, requiring tricky trade-offs in the budget or just plain acceptance of just how boned you were. When my wife's phone broke, I went into full panic mode while she shrugged and said, "We can just get a new one this afternoon." And then we did. Edit. Wow, I've received a lot of responses on this, by far my most upvoted. You guys made my day, so thank you. I've seen a few repair it comments. Like many of you, I'm also a Picasso of the duct tape and trash bag world. This skill helped me break into IT. Sadly, the phone was beyond repair. Trust me, if I could have fixed it, I would have. And thank you for the silver. Last edit. Y'all are giving me too many medals. I'm very flattered. He was making good money, but came from a poor family. One thing that surprised me was the lack of budgeting. No knowledge. Retirement seemed like something that he'd never get to do. So even though he made good money, he was starting to rack up credit card debt. Now he's much better at it than I am. He adores budgeting and looks forward to FIRE. Edit. FIRE is financial independence. Retire early, there's a sub attached to this idea. Ugh, I would actually dream of retiring early. Imagine if we could retire at 25. I'd be like, see ya! Throw my computer against the wall and walk out. I'm from the poorer family. Not super poor, but my in-laws have a stupid amount of money. So by comparison, I'm very poor. But I think I can answer for her. We have 2 young kids, and my wife was shocked when I said we should look for clothes and toys for them at local flea markets and garage sales. The idea never occurred to her that we could save money by getting some gently used items. She'd never even been to a garage sale in her life. She has grown to love them, and now questions whether it's worth it to buy an item new or not before running to Amazon or a store. Her parents think it's disgusting we make our kids wear clothes that another child had before, but they don't pay my bills. Preach. There's nothing better than a charity shop. Literally, I used to hate them when I was younger because I was embarrassed, but now you literally can't get me out of one. Like, I'm holding onto the railings and begging you to not drag me out of the charity shop. Like, they're just absolutely genius. Some of the quality is brilliant as well, like 100% from me. It doesn't directly relate to the amount of money they had, I don't think, but their place was always filthy. I mean, dog poo everywhere. My significant other lived with his mum sometimes, but would rotate between her and his father, and both places were this way. Dishes piled up, floors were grimy, the place stunk of dog pee and cigarette smoke. One time, I used the bathroom at one of his parents' places and had to spread my feet while sitting on the toilet to avoid stepping in period blood. I mean, it was disgusting. My significant other was baffled when, after we first got married and moved in with each other, every day he would come home to a generally, I'm not perfect, spotless home. Now, on the flip side, I once dated a guy whose stepfather was a lawyer, so they lived a lavish lifestyle. The only thing that he was surprised about when it came to my lifestyle was that I did not eat pizza with a knife, fork, and a glass of wine. Who eats pizza with a knife and fork? Like, you're a loser. Pick it up, get your hands dirty, mate. Do you know, my wife genuinely thought, and her family still does, that there's a direct relationship between someone's net worth and the labels they purchase. If someone doesn't have a Gucci bag or a Rolex watch, why? It's because they can't afford it. My wife was astonished when I first told her that people exist that are ultra wealthy and yet drive old cars and wear clothes without labels. About to marry him. We met in college and my parents paid for everything while he had student loans and a part-time job to pay for everything else. If he was really hurting, his parents would transfer $40 into his account. But that was pretty rare, and they'd give him hell if he asked. He was always very anxious about spending money and never bought name brands. He would also buy essentials like toilet paper by 2 rolls at a time, 1 ply only. He didn't really realise that buying so little every few days was wasting money rather than buying in bulk. When we booked our first vacation, cheap road trip to Georgia, he couldn't pay for anything and was worried the whole time. The anxiety that would keep him up at night made me so sad. He still never fills up his gas tank all the way, only $10 at a time. Drives me nuts. But now we both have great full-time jobs and he rarely has any anxiety. He never has to worry about money anymore and is so much happier as a result. Oh, I'm glad. Oh, it's so rubbish how much stress and anxiety money brings. Like it's literally just a number in a bank account and it just completely rules our lives. So depressing. My family is far from rich, but I grew up closer to the upper middle class realm and was making 3 times as much as my now husband when we met. He grew up extremely poor and his family is still living that way. One big difference is how he's surprised that my parents pick up the check when we go out to celebrate a birthday or a graduation, and that my parents ask him to pick whatever restaurant he wants. Outside of the ritziest steakhouse in town, they don't care. To his family, a big meal out is going to McDonald's and not eating off the dollar menu. I'm serious. Differences in our childhoods. Disneyland. Went to Disneyland often. Part of the experience was eating the expensive food there. Her. Did not go often. Brought in food. Birthday/Christmas. Me. Had big parties with lots of friends and gifts. Her. No gifts. Didn't really celebrate. Expectations and disappointments. Me. Because I was never constantly growing up in disappointments, I didn't care if something didn't work out as I expected. I took a chance anyways. Her. Constant disappointments. My wife earned many times more than I did when I was a high school teacher back when we were dating. She sometimes would drive my 10-year-old Primer Black stick-shift Honda Civic that my cousin lent me until I could buy another car. She was blown away how aggressively mean people are to you when you drive an ugly old car. When she got out the car, the spell lifted. I got a lot of respect from her for that. She seemed to think I was a saint for not turning sour over it. I was constantly getting pulled over by cops and let go, targeted by road rage, and also pedestrians felt too comfortable engaging with me. I drive a newer Honda, 1-year-old now, and it's so different. I drive the same, but probably drive a bit more aggressively now that I can't hear the wind roaring by when I'm going over 40 miles per hour. I haven't been pulled over and haven't had a negative interaction on the road in a long time. Also, my wife now enjoys trading cars with me. I don't really come from a well-off family, divorced parents and whatnot, but we did always have clothes and food, and normally got brand-name clothes and some expensive things from our grandparents for presents. My girlfriend, though, that I've been living with for the last year, came from a family of 5, all with different dads and no actual dad that stuck around. Bounced around foster care when she was really young, until her grandparents took her in, but at times went without eating because there was no money, and continued to live this way until she moved out right after high school and could just barely afford what she needed. Fast forward to now, she started to come around to the idea that we can always buy groceries and spend a decent amount of them if she wants. She was always super against spending any money on anything that wasn't needed, always worried about something going wrong and suddenly needing more than what we have saved up. To be honest though, I do get this because if you've been in that way of life and you're so used to that way of life for so many years, it's really hard to break those habits. So I do understand that she's still the same even when she has more money now. I think anyone would be. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos coming daily.